So the first sister mentions how dangerous these stalking creatures were, and Ornn finally agrees that, it's a problem, but I'm not helping you with it.
Yeah. The conversation is really great because it's basically the high fantasy version of, damn, that's crazy.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 86. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hedge.
What's up, everybody? We're going to start punching some mountains.
Time to punch a mountain. So we're gonna move at a clip for this one because there's a lot of information and we know your time is precious. So housekeeping up top, you can listen to us everywhere. You can send us emails at podcastcore@gmail.com. You can visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info and follow us on any platform or all the platforms. We appreciate it. And then leave us a like, comment, short review. Easiest way is word of mouth. Tell one friend to learn to forge their hammer by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast. We're talking about this story, The Lost Tales of Ornn. And I say story, but it's a collection of multiple stories. So this is a collection of campfire fire stories being told to a group of children by an elder in the Freljord. And specifically, because now we have the card, we believe that it's the favored artisan or the old woman in the art for the favored artisan, because the quote on that card says, "My mother told me of Ornn, and her mother told her, and her mother before, and now I will tell you. Listen closely, do not interrupt. Long ago, across a great hot churning sea, ... And that kind of sets up this story, which I think the author did on purpose.
Yeah, and it just makes sense for it that way too, because this is like this is how lore is born. Always starts as word of mouth, and it goes down generation after generation, and it gets mixed up and is born into legend. So we're going to be at the starting point of these legends picking up, which is awesome. And also we're following Ornn, and Ornn is just cool.
Yeah.
So let's hop into
it.
Ornn
is hot.
Well, that's just a fact.
It's that meme where it's like, oh no, he's hot.
Oh no. Oh no.
So we start with the first story, which is the shaping of the land. So by the way, if you haven't listened to our Ornn episode, which is 85, go listen to that first. It's kind of like stretching before you work out. You don't want to pull a muscle. So before you come here, go check that one out. It'll help you out. But we find out that Ornn is the oldest demigod. He is the firstborn of his brothers and sisters. So Nivea, all the sisters, etc. Seal sister, blah, blah, blah. He's born into this world, and he immediately challenges the land, and he naturally starts shaping the land around him, which we now know as Freljord, which this is counter characteristic to the Ornn we know, right? Like, he's running around, he's punching mountains, he's hopping back and forth. It's like, wait, who is this?
Yeah, like if you've listened to the bio for Ornn, you know that he is a guy that just wants to be left alone. He likes his privacy, he likes peace and quiet, but at the birth, he is the rambunctious child. So that just means something happened, and luckily we have these stories behind to kind of tell us what happened. I do want to point out, though, that thanks to these stories, we do know that, yes, he's a demigod, and whereas like in his bio, they just are kind of like, we have no idea what Ornn is. He's too chill to be a demigod, but also it seems like he's been here literally forever.
Yeah.
So this 100% confirms it. And with, talking about his sister and talking about like the other demigods there, like his sister and his brother. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, okay, it's just a fact. Cool. We know it now. So yeah, he's just a very chill demigod.
Yeah. So he gets tired and then starts to become the Ornn we know. He thanks the land for the battle, and the land responds by opening up this fiery pit that he saw his own reflection for the first time, which was a fiery ram. And then, being pleased, he set himself to building tools and weapons. And that's kind of the entry into his birth, into the Ornn that we're more familiar with.
And that's really cool, because it is just kind of like a very, simple kind of starting, but also it's like, no, he literally battled the land. So he's literally like, he gets to a point where he punches a mountain and the mountain didn't budge, and that brought him joy because it meant he could keep fighting the mountain. So it's like this Ornn is a ridiculous being. But yeah, now that he's chilled out and everything, we hop over into the second chapter, and now that he's gotten to see himself and that he's come to be thankful for the land, for the battle, and the land has opened up to him, he decides to build a house. And obviously, a demigod's going to have a very humble house, right?
Yes, this is my favorite tale out of the five here. So this one's the origin of snow. So he builds a majestic horn hall. So before the hearth that we talked about before, he had the horn hall, which spanned 3 valleys. So it was in Georgia. And he was satisfied so much that for the first time before language existed, he spoke, saying to himself, "Good."
Key point, this is before language existed, so this is
a big deal.
That's high praise.
That's high praise. So since he used Anivia's favorite tree to build it, she wanted to teach him a lesson, right? Because she now exists as well. And one of his sisters. So while he's sleeping, she goes in and with her feathers, she tickles his nose. Like, this is classic, like, fairy tale type stuff. Tickles his nose, causing him to sneeze, but it's Ornn, so he sneezes and fire comes out, and he sets the bed sheets and the floor ablaze. Anivia panics and tries to get out of there, and while she's panicking, she's flapping her wings, which is fanning the flames, which is making everything burn faster. So she takes off, but Ornn doesn't wake up. He sleeps through it, and he wakes in a pile of ashes. And to this day, he doesn't know she caused it, and she won't tell him. But what he thinks caused it was him praising himself. And he vowed to never compliment his own work
His
again.
damn pride. His damn pride. But like if you follow other mythologies like Norse mythology or Greek, Roman mythology, like this is all of those old tales are like this, where, you know, it's simple human-like interactions of a sister being a pain in the ass while you're trying to sleep. But they're demigods, so it's a global scale. Because of Anivia's little prank, she literally sets 3 valleys on fire. So yeah, I love it. I love it.
So his next goal was to learn from this lesson and build a non-flammable home. Or I forgot how the flame was inflammable is technically not flammable. I forgot how that works. We won't go down that path right now. It won't burn down.
Go to TikTok if you want to go down that path.
TikTok if you want that info. So he then created more tools. He created a spade, a lever, and a fork to allow him to dig, move things, and eat. Because who doesn't love food, especially in this age? And he digs into the Black Mountain and finds out it's too hot for him to live inside the mountain. So he then decides to dig a trench. And this trench leads to the sea. And that's going to come into the mountain and the water's going to flow in. So after about 3 days after the seal sister, which is mentioned in other things about the water, you know, we'll get to there, right? There's other stories.
That's down the road.
That's down the road. But the seal sister allowed him to use the water and it flowed into the mountain. So after 3 days, he finally was able to live in it. But this process darkened the sky because we know how, you know, evaporation works.
Yeah, water doesn't actually disappear.
What?
So obviously with all of the steam being created in such a cold climate, the moisture goes up into the sky and then becomes snow. But again, these are demigods we're talking about. So the scale is that, you know, he pours enough water into this mountain and all the steam forms into snow, and it snows for 100 years.
That's it.
And that's it. This is why the Freljord is covered in snow. It's because Ornn just wanted to build his house.
Yeah. And that's why it's covered in snow to this day. And that ends that story, that tale. And the frame for this is, remember, she's telling this story to these kids as they're slowly dozing off. So they keep asking for more and more. And she's running out of stories. So we get the third story here called The 3 Sisters Ask Ornn for Help. Now, we have more episodes that are important to this concept. Cough, cough, Lysandra, cough, cough.
Cough, cough, Sejuani, cough, cough, Ash. The 3 sisters may or may not be important to the lore of Freljord.
Yeah, so go check those out. It might give you a little bit of insight here. But we have three sisters asking Ornn to help them save the world. And they're very vague on what that means. Honestly, it doesn't matter because he doesn't have any interest. So the first sister mentions how dangerous these stalking creatures were. And Ornn finally agrees that, it's a problem, but I'm not helping you with it.
The conversation is really great because it's basically the high fantasy version of, damn, that's crazy. Got him.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, it really is just like he never even looks up from his forge, and he's like, "That sounds like a problem." This is the high fantasy version of, "Damn, that's crazy. Are you done? Like, are you done talking to me? Can I just go back to my own world?"
So the second sister is like, "Okay, well, can you help us dig a trench, and then we'll lead the creatures into it, and you don't have to do anything else." And he's like, all right, I can do that, right? Since he planned on doing it anyways, quote unquote, kill two birds with one stone. So he simply dug a deep hole and then he left without a word, right? That's kind of his style. If he agrees to do something, he'll do it reluctantly and then leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, after this battle occurs, the sisters return, and the third one, the Shiesty one, asked him for one more favor. And the third sister, she asked him, okay, teach me how to build a bridge, since the hole you built for us was a bit too wide and not anyone can do it, right? And he was hesitant about this third sister, mainly because her magic, her aura, was off.
She failed the vibe check.
She failed the vibe check.
The vibes are off, man.
Exactly. And the second sister, who's more honest, knows that the sister's lying and knows that they don't need him to build that bridge. There's no reason for that. So he was cautious, but he ends up doing it. And one reason that leads him to do it is she mentions star metal.
Yeah.
And that catches his interest.
And if you follow anything in the fantasy realm, there's always mentions of using meteorites as in blacksmithing. So, star metal is clearly a meteorite. And Ornn, as we covered in his bio, he just wants to work his forge.
Yeah.
So then it's like, I don't care about your conflict, but a new toy for my forge, you say? Now that has my attention.
Yeah. Even though he's a demigod, he's only human.
He's only human.
So she agrees, okay, I'll use the star metal. I'll also take some as payment, and then you're good. Cool. So the first thing he does is make a tool, because when you're working with something like star metal, you want a star metal tool to do it. It's like cutting diamonds with diamonds, right? So he makes a tool out of star metal. He builds the bridge, and he decides, oh, this tool, I like it a lot. And it's for hammering, so I'll call it a hammer.
You know what? I like simplicity.
I like simplicity. Straight to the point.
Straight to the point.
It sells itself. So once he's done, same kind of deal. He's out of sight, right? He bounces, and the third sister starts walking along the bridge and casting some incantation to seal the creatures below. Once again, go listen to our Lysandra episode.
Yes.
And her story.
That's a big deal. This is a big deal happening. Not to Ornn.
It's not his problem. But he does know what's going on, right? He was already suspicious of her. And he knew that if she did that, it would corrode over time, that bridge. It made the bridge weaker by her adding that magic to it. It would take many ages, but it would happen. And he vowed from that point forward that he would no longer do favors for people. And not only vowing, he decides to get rid of the tools he used to do favors. To ensure that he couldn't go back on his word. So he throws his spade to the west, and then he throws his fork to the Great Sea, which becomes an important tool down the road for someone else.
Cough, cough.
Cough, cough. Wink, wink. And then he couldn't bring himself to throw his hammer away because he just liked it too much. So he held on to it.
Yeah, and so, if you're involved in a shiesty deal, get rid of the evidence. Make sure that you were never there. Don't take your cell phone with you. Also, probably delete this episode of the podcast if you're under investigation just for that line. But yeah, no, like I love here too, because this is like setting up the Ornn that we know of, just like he doesn't want to bother with other people. And people don't get there they don't get there on their own. They get there because of other people that have just taught them that, like, yo, I don't like this. And Ornn is like, I don't like people asking me for favors. So I'm just not going to do it anymore. I just want to stay in my forge and be myself.
Yeah, the cool thing about these stories, like we mentioned this in the previous episode, where this gives you a more deeper rounding of Ornn as he's a demigod, but he's still learning, right? It's like Hercules, right? Over the course of these experiences, he's learning, and he's learning in a space that's kind of sanitized, right? Because there's not that many beings outside of his brothers and sisters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I keep bringing up like these other mythologies, is because it's like these other mythologies, they keep the gods human.
Yeah.
And Ornn is very much just human as far as his demeanor. And it just so happens that when he sneezes, he burns mountain ranges.
So now we get to the next story, the fourth story, The Troll and the Ramdor. Another good one. Enters Grubgrak.
And I love this one just because of the first line of the story, which is everyone knows that you never challenge a troll to a drinking contest, don't they?
I didn't know that.
You already know that this is going to be a good one.
So he's the oldest trollkin in the world. And I'm just going to read the description because it's great. It doesn't hold back. It's pretty much a roast session at this point. Grubgrak the hairiest, or the hideous, sorry. It's probably hairy too. The hideous was the oldest trollkin in the world. His chest hair was so long it got tangled up in his gnarled toes. Ugh. He would often trip over it and break his nose, which was bulbous and misshapen from being broken so many times. He only had 2 good teeth, 1 bad eye, and 1 worse eye. Warts and pimples covered his rounded belly. I would tell you how he smelled. If I did, you would never eat fermented fish stew again. Wow. This writer had fun.
Oh yeah. I mean, it does read like a roast thing. The writer's got a cigar in one hand, a cocktail in the other hand, and is just smiling into a microphone as he's like, "Yeah, the crowd's eating this up. Like this is just roast." Like
Hunter S. Thompson.
Like
time for my cocaine binge.
Yeah. And that's why the Freljord's covered in snow.
Oh, man. Too good.
Yeah, so Grubgrak the Hideous earns his title as being the Hideous. And so as far as with this, we have Grubgrak coming to Ornn and is like, build me a door that will keep my treasure safe from thieves forever. And we've already gotten some foreshadowing as to what's going to happen here, or like a little bit. We cover it in some other episodes. Just listen to all of our Freljord episodes.
We only have 100+ episodes. Just go listen to all of them.
Just go listen to them. But so we know what door this is, but we also, what we don't know is that Ornn isn't too happy about this because we just covered that he doesn't want to do favors anymore.
He does not.
So Grubgrak is like, hey, build me this door and I will give you 10 casks of my troll mead. It's a family recipe.
He doesn't want it. Ornn just wants him to go away.
Yep.
But Grubgrak is incessant and he sticks his foot in the door, and Ornn usually tries to find other ways to convince himself to do something. He's like, well, if he doesn't move his foot, he's going to scratch my paint. All right, I'll let him in, let him talk. And he says, okay, I'm going to challenge you. Challenge you to a drinking contest. Once again, you don't do challenges with trolls. And Ornn's like, okay, well, I agree, but only if you go away. Because Ornn thinks he can win it. So as he turns his back to prepare for this, challenge, Grubgrak slips some true ice into his cask. Not his cask, but into Ornn's cask.
Right.
And then they begin the competition. So when Ornn's drinking, he's doing good time, but he notices that it feels like he's constantly drowning. And Grubgrak is able to finish his and put his down and laugh at him. So he wins, right? And then Ornn notices that his drink is still filling perpetually because the true ice is constantly melting and refilling the cask.
Well, this is such a brilliant little use of the world around them to make sure that Grubgrak gets the win.
Yeah.
Because it's a fun way of telling you more properties about the true ice.
Yeah.
Because we just know that the true ice was there from the dawn of time.
No.
We know that like the and I'm blanking now, but the heroes, the Iceborns.
Yes.
Like the Iceborn have some kind of connection with the true ice. And here's Ornn just drinking it. It's such a fun way of like, true ice never melts. Or if it melts perpetually.
Yeah.
How did you know that? a drinking contest.
Yeah. It's as if Grubgrat got it from like Spencer's.
Yeah.
Right? In this context. So after this happens, he's like, Ornn's like, okay, a deal's a deal, even though you cheated. And I'm gonna make your stupid door. So he smashes his cask and he says his word is as good as his hammer, and he gets to work. So over 10 days, he builds the single best door he's ever built. And he makes sure he puts a giant ram's head in the middle. We'll come to why that matters in a moment. And then once he's done, he fastens it. And as the author put particularly, he trundled off.
I love that.
And I was like, you sly fox, you.
Y'all gross. Y'all gross for that.
Y'all gross. And speechless, which is, tough for a troll, he finally just sits there staring at the door and admiring Ornn's work because he's no fool. He knows why he went to Ornn. And then finally his wits come to him, and because he's a greedy troll, he's like, I haven't counted my money in a day. I need to count my gold now. And he panics and he tries to get in. But what happens?
Ornn made the best door that has ever been made. And a good door is not going to open unless you got the key.
Yeah.
So it's Ornn's turn to cheat somebody.
Yeah. And Grubgrak is like, well, shit, man, listen. He's like, I know I tricked you, but I didn't take anything from you, right? Nothing valuable. I didn't steal from you. And Ornn turns around and replies, time is more valuable than gold. And to this day, if you listen closely, you can hear the troll's wails of anguish before an avalanche.
Yep, and
still never got back in. It's like, my wallet.
Yeah,
his phone's probably dead. Yeah, it's not charged.
So the phone's dead. He's running out of rations, and he's still just trying to beat down this door. And I love that they keep hammering, and it's the ram-headed door stares back at him. An eternal reminder of the time he cheated Ornn. Again, this is just like akin to all of like old mythos and stuff of just, there's always a cost coming with these different, these decisions that you make. There's always a consequence. But these stories are very simple.
Yeah.
But these grand scale of just like largest, craziest looking door you've ever seen, most impenetrable door. But otherwise it's just like, I locked the door and kept the key. It's like if you just take away all the grandeur of it, it's a very simple story.
Yeah. So we get to the final story here, and this elderly woman is only telling it because one of the youngest kids is still awake. And he's not believing it. Right? He doesn't believe in Ornn. He doesn't believe in these fairy tales. And he's still awake. So she offers him her final and best story that she was saving for later. And this is the tragedy of the Hearthblood. So this actually ties into our bio episode that we did previously, and gives us more context on that.
Yeah, the tragedy of the Hearthblood. So does it have a happy ending?
No.
Wait, but Romeo and Juliet's a happy ending, right?
Oh, no. So long ago, there was a legion of smiths living at the base of the mountain, of Ornn's mountain, known as the Hearthbloods, right? They claimed to worship Ornn, but not really in an over-top way, right? They valued his approval. They made weapons, they made tools, and they would bring them to him. And they called themselves the Hearthbloods. And not like a gang, but like there's no Hearth Crips, right?
Hey, you gotta be careful what colors you're wearing up that mountain.
Exactly. But Ornn understood this. They were amazing at their craft. They took their time. They took pride in it, and so did he. So he was hesitant to outwardly praise them just because of his past, right? But whenever they would show him their tools, he would merely say, passable.
Yeah, and we know from his bio that it was like, otherwise it's not a word, it's just a nod or a shake of the head.
Yeah.
Like the conversation's very minimal.
Yeah.
This is where we actually get like some details where it's like Ornn never admitted that he admired the Hearthblood, but deep inside his chest, his volcanic heart churned with respect for the hardworking people.
Yeah.
So it's
The
like
Grinch's heart
he does
grew.
grew tenfold. So yeah, he likes having these people around, and
Yeah.
he's just never going to admit it because he wants to be left alone.
Exactly. So enters Volibear.
Uh-oh.
Who we find out is his brother. So Volibear comes in like a wrecking ball. And he's the complete opposite of Ornn, right? Like I said, every Thor needs a Loki. And he demands Ornn make his followers weapons and armor for some battle that he's gotten himself into again. And Ornn refuses because that's not how his situation works, right? Like Volibear, he kind of twists and molds his followers. He demands like flesh. We won't go too much into it because we'll talk about Volibear at a later date.
Yes.
But that's not Ornn's whole situation with him and the Hearthbloods, right? And he's like, no. And Volibear's like, well, shit, if you won't do it, then make your followers do it. That's why they exist, to, follow your whim. And Ornn reiterates that these are not my followers. They simply build for themselves. And as this is going on, Volibear knows what he's doing. It's his brother. He knows he's poking the right buttons. And one big giveaway is Ornn's horns are getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Then they get white hot. And then he demands that Volibear leaves and never returns. And Volibear is like, okay, cool. And literally does a thing like a cat does and swipes everything off a shelf. He grabs the armor off the wall and he's like, of the forge. And Ornn immediately charges him and the fight is on.
Yeah, so from now on our show, we're just going to refer to him as Volleycat.
Volleycat.
It really is. I mean, it's straight up just like a cat. Just like, oh, you have this on the table? No, it's off the table now.
I took it and threw it on the ground. So they fought for days, 8 days. So in the previous bio, it was a night, right? In this, it's 8 days, and the damage to the land was unimaginable. We talked about this in the previous episode. There were lightning strikes. The skies were black and red. I mean, they were literally moving mountains. And worst of all was the result of the fight, which was the annihilation of the Hearthbloods.
Yeah. So again, it is. We're laughing as far as just like the way that, Volibear, like any little brother, is just going to poke the right buttons to make sure that, like I'm either going to get my way or we're going to fight. Like he knows what he's doing. And then we're laughing.
Mom said it's my turn on the Xbox.
And it's like we're laughing about, like a cat sweeps all the stuff off the table. But this is just like the other stories where Ornn, sneezes.
Yeah.
Or, he's just pouring water into his new home. But these are demigods. So everything is a much bigger scale. So yes, this is a brotherly tussle.
Yeah.
But the lightning and the fire is on cataclysmic levels.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about a god that when sneezes burns a whole mountainside. What if he's intentionally letting the fire out?
Yeah.
That's the level that we're jumping to as far as the destruction that is in the wake of their fight.
Exactly. And then from that point on, it really hits home, Hearth home. It stood silent. From that point forward, no one really knows from the lore perspective. So this is where we get some deviation that we talked about in the last episode from the bio versus the story. Here we're told that some say that Ornn died in that battle, and there's only these light puffs of smoke coming from where his forge used to be. But others think that he's quietly and slowly building a great weapon that he will one day unleash for, a future threat that we know about. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Listen to all our episodes. And then he hasn't returned to Freljord since. Like, people haven't seen him since. As we mentioned from the cards, Hearthbloods are starting to pop back up, and people practicing it. We know from Anivia's episode where Anivia is kind of coming back and checking out things in the current time frame and not really sure if she wants to get involved or not. So his brothers and sisters are taking physical forms again in the current timeline. So it only makes sense that if Ornn is alive, he should pop back up. But Volibear's not going to tell us that,
and it's also because like
he's not going to say he lost.
Yeah, and one of the lines that is from their argument is that Volibear says, "Well, your followers are a reflection of you."
Yeah.
So the Ornn is somebody who wants to keep to himself. So even if he comes back, he still wants to keep to himself.
Yeah.
And like we know Volibear's around because there are the Ursine tribe. And you're not going to look at someone and ask yourself, do you think he follows Volibear? No, you're gonna know. You're gonna know that they're the Ursine tribe. So, like, Volibear is
Is he an Eagles fan? Oh, you'll know.
Oh, yeah.
You'll know he likes the Eagles.
I work with an Eagles fan, so that is so funny to me. Every Friday he's dead. But yeah, so like, you know, you're gonna know that Volibear fans are Volibear fans. Whereas, you know, like, not only were all of the Hearthblood basically wiped out, that we're learning, but if they're coming back, if they're a reflection of Ornn, they're not going to be announcing themselves.
Yep.
They're just going to be making the finest crafts that they can make quietly, and they'll share them with you, and they'll work with you, but they're not going to go out of their way to do so.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the Ornn we promised. We gave you the whole spiel. Psych, there's more, but not now.
Not yet.
You've had enough. It's been 2 episodes.
No. And just like the child that Grandma was finally getting to go to sleep around the campfire, it's you let the fire die down a bit. Take rest. We'll talk more later. We'll get there.
So with that, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Take care, everybody.